There have been so many stories and legends being told on the island of Sodor. Most of them were brought up whenever long periods of fog and mist came, and the engines would bring up these supernatural tales. There was one story in particular that had recently been brought up, one that gave children nightmares in the worst way. Once upon a time, there was an engine who used to work on Sodor, long before Thomas came in 1915. The story went something like this. Early one night, there was a steam engine waiting at the docks to take his passengers home. He had a similar shape like Thomas, with 6 small wheels, except he was painted silver and had the number 0 on his side. His name was Timothy. He was an old but kind engine, with a broad smile and wrinkles at the end of his mouth. All the passengers climbed on board the coaches, and the guard blew his whistle. "All steam ahead, Timothy."
Sure thing.
Timothy was soon puffing down the line in the countryside, with the rails humming and the carriages clattering behind him. The moon was full, the signals were down, and the wind was blowing gracefully. As they approached the first station, it happened. The driver applied the brakes, but Timothy kept on going and shot past the station. He started to go faster and faster.
"Timothy, what are you doing?"
Timothy didn't answer. He just kept on going. Suddenly, they were switched off the wrong line, heading away from the main line. Then the driver and fireman saw in horror that they were heading towards a cliff where a viaduct was to be built.
"Timothy, don't! You will kill us all!"
The driver and firemen scrambled and fiddled with the controls, desperately trying their best to stop him, but it was no use.
"I'm gonna send you all to the graveyard!"
The train had crashed through the blockade and had fallen into the ravine below, killing everyone on board. Timothy and his crew were also killed upon impact. There was no eyewitnesses and no survivors. The wreck was found by the workmen the following day, but they couldn't identify who the engine was due to being blown up and charred beyond recognition. When investigators came, they had very little evidence to go on, but the bodies of the driver and fireman were found, and they thought they had tried to save the locomotive and the passengers, but couldn't in time. Investigators ruled it as a normal tragic train accident with mechanical failure to the controls as the cause of the crash. Years later, the construction of the viaduct was commenced. However, after the rails were laid and the final works to it were being made, many workmen and railway staff reported seeing a ghost train rushing by, whistling fit to burst and cursing in a demonic voice before screaming into the darkness and disappearing. Many witnesses didn't know that it was the ghost of Timothy haunting the viaduct, but nobody really knew whether to believe it or not. But it was, according to those who had heard about the story. And every year, on the date of his suicidal accident, Timothy runs again as a warning to others, plunging into the gap, shrieking like a lost soul. The legend of Timothy's untold story was so dark that if any children were told about it by mishap, they would get nightmares and scream out at night. But the story was never revealed to the Fat Controller's engines until now. One foggy evening, Percy was returning home after a hard day's work at the docks. He was tired and in need of a long rest. He was travelling along a route which he knew of. It was a shortcut to get home. Percy knew where he was, even in the dark.
It should be long now, for I'm nearing Crow's Farm Crossing.
Crow's Farm Crossing was located near Heckenbeak, which was a small hamlet serving as a halt on Thomas's branch line. As Percy continued his run, the rails hummed and the signal lights shone green. Then he heard a whistle that was not familiar to him. Followed by a voice echoing in the darkness. Children, children. Percy was confused. He slowed down and whistled back.
Hello? Is anyone there?
I like children. I like children. Percy was getting more confused. As he was about to cross Crow's Farm Crossing, he and his crew both gasped in horror as another engine shot out from the fog. Percy wailed out, whistling long and loud as he closed his eyes, expecting a crash. But then silence quickly fell. Cautiously, Percy opened one of his eyes as his driver and fireman looked out from opposite sides from the cab. No one was there.
What in Satan's name was that?
It looked like an engine, but that was no kind of engine, but it looked enough.
The driver paused. He began to remember something from long ago.
Percy, remember the time I told you about the ghost story about the one that I saw the night before and was to be a pretend ghost on television? I'm just beginning to think that possibly. No, I'm not kidding here. I believe that now it was not a fake story at all. It was real. I was wrong. The ghost train was real!
His wheels shivered at the thought if his driver was believing the story that he had told him. But even he was starting to have second doubts about it. And he was still thinking about it when he made it back to the sheds. But just who was the mysterious and horrifying ghost engine that he and his crew saw? The next morning, Percy was still feeling shocked from last night. All day he kept on thinking about who the ghost train was, and whether or not his driver's story was really true or still made up. The little green engine could remember the time years ago he was told about it, and then telling about it to Thomas and Toby. Thomas didn't believe it, and later got a fright from Percy after his accident with a cart of lime. It all seemed like yesterday, but both Thomas and Percy had not forgotten about it. At the sheds, Thomas and Toby were being looked at by engineers. Outside, the weather had changed. The mist had come down, and it was crawling along the rails. At that moment, Percy puffed in after delivering the mail train.
Percy, are you okay?
But I saw a ghost train, but it's not like any other. It's so scary and very demonic, as if it came from the underworld. And when I saw it, it was coming straight at me, and by the time I opened my eyes, it was gone.
That's some story, and most of all over the top. A ghost train that looks demonic? That's mostly something you'd see out of a horror movie.
Did you get a good view of it? What did he look like?
I couldn't tell, it was happening so fast.
Surely your mind was only playing a trick on you. Or perhaps you're remembering about the event years ago when you pulled off that ghost prank on me when you were pretending to be the ghost train from that made-up story your driver told you.
That's just it, Thomas. Remember when my driver told me about that story? He now thinks that it's real, and the ghost train does indeed exist.
Wait. This was all made up, and now years later, your driver's changing it to thinking it's real. Come on, Per. See, ghost stories are there for a reason. They're there to give us a scare, and not like in scaring us to death or something.
You can all go on about this, but that ghost train story that I told Percy a long time ago seems to come back and haunt me.
What do you mean?
The story that I told was for real. When I was looking through the documents of past accidents and incidents, I stumbled across one that had not been looked at in a very long time. The records showed about an engine who had a tragic crash and left behind a haunting story that was only have been recently told. The event happened a long time ago, way before Thomas, Percy, and Toby came to the railway. The train was taking passengers home when, according to the reports from the investigators, its brakes failed and the engine continued on going until it ran off a cliff, which was where the viaduct was built many years later. The engine crashed, killing everyone. But as the decades went by, witnesses claimed to have seen a ghost train running along the anniversary of its accident. Even I saw it, but I got a better look and saw its face. The engine had a very cold presence, one that I never felt before. He had an evil and demonic look that only the devil himself could describe. The engine had a number 0 on his side with 6 small wheels and was painted silver.
An engine with 6 wheels, painted silver, and the number 0. Who was he?
The engine's overall appearance was just like you, Thomas, and his name was Timothy. Why, bless my bell!
So the ghost train that I saw was him.
It seems to be, now that I remember it. It fitted the story of how it came together.
Timothy was an engine who looked like me? but I never saw him or ever met him before. How is this even possible that he can resemble me?
No one replied. The shed had gone quiet. Thomas was still in a state of shock. Toby was confused, and Percy was left with so many questions flying around in his smoke box. The truth in finding out who the ghost train was had been told at last.